After Saturday's loss to the LA Kings, it's more likely than ever that the Edmonton Oilers will start on the road in the postseason for the first time in the Connor McDavid, Leon Draisaitl era on today's edition of Locked On Oilers.
You are Locked On Oilers, your daily podcast on the Edmonton Oilers, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to this Monday edition of Locked On Oilers. I am your host, Nick Zararis, coming up on 1 full year as host of Locked On Oilers. I want to thank everyone that's making Locked On Oilers their first listen of the day. Locked On Oilers, a part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. On today's show, we are going to walk through the Oilers' very precipitous playoff position. We're going to walk through in the opening segment their playoff math, why more likely than not they are going to start on the road in the playoffs. Our second segment, we're going to bounce around the various injury updates we have on the handful of very important players: McDavid, Draisaitl, Ekholm, Stuart Skinner, John Klingberg, Trent Frederick, a whole lot to get to in the injury department. And then we'll tie a bow on this Monday edition of the show, explaining why, even though these environmental circumstances are less than ideal, if there's any team that's going to be able to overcome that adversity and overcome those circumstances, it very well might be our Edmonton Oilers. So at the outset, going into Saturday afternoon's game, you really needed this in terms of your playoff math. The Kings are the team you are in the most direct competition with as far as home ice in that first round series. Now, it is not mathematically impossible for the Oilers to catch the Kings or the Kings to catch the Golden Knights, and then the Golden Knights would slide down to that 2 spot and the Oilers could open up very well on the road in Vegas as well. But for the most part, it feels like the Oilers have reached a tipping point, and the math is no longer favorable for them to dig themselves out of this rut. And it's fair to say that over the last month and change, if we go back to the end of the Four Nations face-off break, it's fair to say the Oilers have underwhelmed. I would venture to say it's fair to say the Oilers have even disappointed. And since January 30th, the Oilers have just 12 wins over their last 26 games. And that does not sound atrocious, but this is a team that entered the season as a Stanley Cup favorite, an outright betting favorite amongst all 32 teams in the NHL. This is who odd makers thought the public would like the most and gave them the best price. The Oilers are 4 points behind the Kings for second place in the Pacific Division as we sit here right now. Both of these teams have 6 regular season games remaining. They play in the second to last game of the regular season. The Oilers' point deficit in this in the standings is 4 points. Unfortunately for the Oilers, the Kings, by virtue of regulation wins being the tiebreaker, the Oilers would need to make up a 5-point deficit, because as of right now, if these two teams were to finish with the same record, the Kings would hold the tiebreaker, so the Oilers would need to find a way to make up a 5-point deficit in just 6 games. That is not impossible for it would not be out of the question if the Oilers were healthy for them to win 4 of their final 6 games, including that second to last game of the season against the Kings. You hope the Kings lose a game or 2 in there, and if the Oilers were healthy, that would be a conversation we could entertain. But as of right now, the Oilers have reached a inflection point in their season. And we're going to address it more in our second and third segments. But as we sit here right now, it's very fair, if you're an Oiler fan or if you're a neutral observer, a fan of another team, to feel like this has been a disappointment. And I don't think it's a coincidence. You are watching the effects of significant playoff experience over the last handful of years begin to accumulate, because yes, as the everydayers hear me talk about all the time when we talk about winning championships and contenders, making the playoffs consistently is the single most important eventual precursor to success. You consistently need to be in the playoffs year over year over year for a prolonged period of time to eventually break through. It is very uncommon for a team in a first or a second playoff run to go the distance and win the whole thing. But if you really want to talk about it in the context of the salary cap era, which is 2005 and on, the only teams that really come to mind are the Kings to some degree. The Blackhawks in 2010, they're only like 3 years removed from taking Patrick Kane. That was a big jump, but that was a very talented team. And then the Penguins coming out of that lockout, rookie Sid, old Lemieux, and as that team turns over and orients around Crosby as opposed to the pre-lockout guys. But by and large, you consistently need to be making the playoffs over and over and over again. That experience is invaluable. When we are talking about teams that are able to overcome adversity, for the most part, it is teams that have extensive experience in that adversity. You think about, there's the clip goes viral every couple months. I see it all the time on TikTok, on Instagram Reels, on YouTube. There's a clip of Teddy Atlas, the boxing trainer, and he's in the corner with his fighter, and his fighter just lost the round they were in. And Teddy Atlas is, are you ready for this? This is why we work for this. This is what we do. And he takes a deep breath and he looks the guy in the eye and says, we are firemen. The fire is coming. Are you ready for it? And that sounds a little ludicrous when you unpack it in the context of sport. That's not a life or death situation. But when you are consistently in those adverse and stressful situations that the playoffs present, those are the teams that calcify, that find ways to resolve and build resolve, I should say. And to throw the dodgeball quote in there, it doesn't build character, it reveals it. That is how you find out what you are as a team and as an individual. When things are going bad, that is where you find out what people are made of, whether we're talking about athletics or we're talking about character. By and large, when someone is having a bad day, when work isn't going well for them, and they're still finding a way to get what they need to do done, they aren't being problematic towards other people, they are going about their business, they are finding a way to forge through, those are the people that find ways out of whatever struggle they might happen to be mired in. And on the aggregate, a lot of these Oiler issues are injury related. And it feels very pointless, for lack of a better word, to kind of pick apart their performance against the Kings last Saturday in a game where you didn't have 3 of your 4 best players. Just when you don't have Ekholm, McDavid, or Draisaitl, there's only so much the rest of the team can do. And we've been talking about this team all season in the context of not being able to score enough. And that's with Connor and Leon in the lineup, let alone without them. So over the next week, you're going to learn a lot about this depth. And I've said this more than once over the last 2 weeks in light of these injuries that are just absolutely ravaging the Oilers roster. If you're a Matthias Janmark, a Kasperi Kapanen, a Connor Brown, a Corey Perry, a Max Jones, you're someone on the periphery of this roster who might not have the most locked in spot come playoff time. This is your opportunity to show Chris Knobloch and the coaching staff that you deserve to be in this lineup consistently, and that when things were bad, when the team was struggling, you were one of the guys who went out there, went about your business, and did your job. Now, as for some of the guys dealing with injuries, we are going to get to that coming up next with updates on the players we have them for. Not every player has as solidified a timeline as others do. So we're going to do a little bit of a deep dive into these injury conversations, when players might be able to return, managing said injuries, and a whole lot more on today's edition of Locked On Oilers. So be sure to stick around. Did you just realize your business needed to hire someone like yesterday? How can you find amazing candidates fast? Easy. Just use Indeed. When it comes to hiring, Indeed is all you need. Stop struggling to get your job post seen on other sites. Indeed sponsored jobs put your post at the top of the page and help you reach the right candidates faster. We have all been in that spot where our team needs the right hire, like yesterday. The pressure is on, And every day without the right person is a setback to your team. That's exactly when Indeed sponsored jobs come in handy. They make sure your post is seen by the right candidates right now. And now you can speed up your hiring process with a $75 sponsored job credit. Just go to Indeed.com/lockedon right now and support our show by saying you heard about Indeed on this podcast. Terms and conditions apply. Hiring? Indeed is all you need. Thank you to everyone who is hanging out on this Monday edition of Locked On Oilers, trying to get your week started off on the right note. And the Oilers are injured. And I said this in the short for Friday ahead of the national show after the injury to Draisaitl in the Seattle game where he left early. When you are the injured to the degree the Oilers are, and the quality of players that are out, you need to recalibrate and you need to adjust what your mindset is as a team and what your approach is in a given game. And as far as dealing with these injuries, I know that come game one, round one, Connor and Leon, no matter what, no matter how bad they're hurting, no matter how sore they are, they're going to get in the lineup. Those two guys are going to do everything in their power to get in the lineup. That said, we also need to be realistic here. It is not feasible for the Oilers to expect to go on a 3-month-long playoff run that it would be. All right, well, 2.5. We don't need to exaggerate. It'd be about a 2.5 months playoff run with physically compromised star players. This team runs one of the most aggressive minute splits in the entire NHL in terms of their lineup. Ekholm and Bouchard. Bouchard's at 23-19. Ekholm is at 22-31. Nurse is at 22-18. McDavid is 22-08. Draisaitl is 21-31. The next forward down is Hyman, down at 19 minutes. We are expecting a lot from Connor and Leon, and it's one of the great efficiencies. When you have a great player, you play them more minutes. Guys like Connor and Leon are physically capable of playing those extra minutes, but I do think it's worth considering. The Oilers have run a really aggressive minute split this year, even more so than in years past. And it's largely been of necessity. It's not that the Oilers are trying to bank on extra points or beat up on teams. They are playing Connor and Leon more than other parts of the lineup because they can't afford to run a fourth line out there every fourth shift an entire game because they don't trust their fourth line enough. They get down, they're down in a game late, or they're protecting a lead late. Chris Knoblauch doesn't want to throw his fourth line or even his third line out there at points trying to protect the lead. So with such an aggressive minute split, it becomes essential for the Oilers' best players to get healthy. And Bob Stauffer said it during the intermission report on Saturday. The first intermission report, I believe, if I recall correctly, had said the biggest priority is getting healthy because this team is going as far as its stars can drive it. And you saw just how special this team's star players can be when the chips are down and the lights are bright. When they need to, they can get to that gear that basically no other team in the league can get to. The problem this year has been they haven't been there a whole lot. They haven't found ways they have not found a way to find a way. And that might sound like circular logic, but allow me to explain. When we talk about sports, we always say good teams find a way, meaning good teams, no matter how poorly they're playing, they can take advantage of circumstances, take that one or two opportunities they get in a game to get back in the game, to come back and win the game. And then we say the inverse about bad teams. Bad teams find a way to lose games. Even when they're playing well, a bad team will find a way to lose a game. And for the last month, 5-6 weeks, the Oilers have been finding ways to lose close games and finding ways to just let teams hang around and take advantage of them. And as far as the injuries, because you cannot discuss this team fairly without accounting for these injuries. We know McDavid has been skating in the morning before games on game days over the last few weeks, but McDavid's missed 7 straight games. He's missed 13 games this season. It's the most he's missed since 2019-20. The shortened season, he missed about 6 regular season games that year. If you'll recall, that season was truncated. They didn't play a full 82, and he missed about 6 or 7 games in that pocket. Draisaitl missed his 5th game in the last month. He returned to the lineup against Seattle and then got hurt, left that game early. Draisaitl has missed 5 games this year. If we're talking about Ekholm, he has missed 5 straight games. He's missed 12 games this year. We know he was dealing with an illness going into the Four Nations. He gutted it out, tried to play through it. Didn't fare particularly well there. Aggravated a nagging injury upon coming back from Four Nations. He hasn't played in 5 straight. Stuart Skinner has missed 5 straight games with a concussion. He most likely will be back by the end of the week, but that's not as set in stone. John Klingberg has missed pretty much the entirety of the month of March, and Bob Stauffer characterized Klingberg's role with the team as fighting for the 7th, 8th, or 9th defenseman spot. So I think John Klingberg, probably your first guy out of the lineup when everyone is fully healthy in a week or so. And the last player to mention, and I do think it's worth talking about this in this context, even though he did play on Saturday, is Trent Frederick, who made his Oilers debut on Saturday. First shift of the game, went out there, hit a guy, and the play got blown dead 6 seconds into that first shift. Frederick only played 7 minutes on Saturday. I definitely think there's a bit of a reticence on the Oilers' part to really push him early, and hadn't played since the last week of February, if I remember correctly, suffered an ankle injury, coming back from a mobility problem. And you need to manage these injuries with surgical precision if you are the Oilers. I know there is a little voice in the back of your head that's saying the Blues are right there. You need to be aware of that. You need to prepare for the reality that you might be a wild card team, because as we sit here, the Blues are on a crazy heater. The Oilers and the Blues have the exact same record in terms of standings points. The Blues have played 2 more games, which is why the Oilers are ahead of them in the standings. But it's not out of the question that the Oilers end up in a position where maybe they play Vegas in the first round. And the Oilers, frankly, are very lucky that the Flames and Canucks have faded over the last handful of weeks, because if those teams were in the mix for the wild cards, the Oilers could very well be facing the proposition of being a wild card team. Because of the way this playoff format is set up, where division gets priority, the Oilers seem to be out of the woods as far as being a wild card team and needing to play either Vegas or Dallas in the first round. And you want to avoid playing good teams as long as you can, because that has a 2-layer benefit. Number one, you're getting an easier matchup earlier in the playoffs. We know historically that teams that go on to win the Stanley Cup, they typically win their first round series in 5 or 6 games. They typically win their second round series in 5 or 6 games. Conference final, cup final, a little bit different. But by and large, if you're going to go all the way, part of it is avoiding injuries. Part of it is being healthy. How do you stay healthy? You play fewer games. And then the other part of those 2 layers, that means 2 better teams are playing each other. You are looking at the prospect of Dallas playing Colorado in the very first round, or Winnipeg playing Colorado in the very first round, depending on how that division shakes out. And that's 2 teams you want to avoid as long as you can. And luckily for the Oilers, they're going to play each other in the first round. So that's 1 less team to worry about. But we talked about this 2 weeks ago on the episode where we talked about the Oilers' best case scenario, the case for optimism. And I said, they are going to avoid the path through the Central. You're going to get the Kings. You're going to get Vegas. And then after that, if you can get to playing Colorado, Winnipeg, or Dallas in the conference final, if you can beat Vegas, you deserve to be in the conference final. And if you deserve to be in the conference final, you should be able to beat who you're matched up against. We are going to take 1 more break on today's edition of Locked On Oilers. And when we return, we are going to pivot to just why, even though the Oilers haven't played great hockey over the last month, even though they're injured, even though they very well might be starting on the road against the Kings, it's not impossible. Be right back. Do you ever check your bank account and wonder, where'd all my money go? Between dining out, online shopping, and entertainment, it's easy to lose track. That's where Monarch Money comes in as your personal CFO, giving you full visibility and control over your finances. Monarch Money isn't just a budgeting app, it's a complete financial command center. You can track all your accounts, investments, and spending in one place, so you stop just managing your money and start building wealth. When I started using Monarch, I realized just how much I was spending on takeout. Now I meal prep, I budget smarter, and save more. Instead of juggling multiple apps, you can use Monarch to check your finances, track spending, and even plan out long-term financial goals. So take control of your finances with Monarch Money. Use code LOCKEDONNHL at monarchmoney.com for 50% off your first year. That's monarchmoney.com, code LOCKEDONNHL for half off your first year. Thank you to everyone who is hanging out on this Monday edition of Locked On Oilers. And real quick, I did want to get this in. Congratulations to Alex Ovechkin, the NHL's all-time leading goal scorer. Incredible moment, something that I frankly never thought we would see. I never thought we would see anyone catch Gretzky for goal scoring. We're never going to see anyone catch Gretzky for points unless the league itself really dramatically changes or Connor McDavid plays till he's like 50. That's really the only way we're going to see something like that happen. McDavid's at 1,000 something career points, 10 years into his career. And even that feels like he's basically another full career away. He's got 1,072 career points. He needs like another 1,500 to catch Gretzky, something ludicrous like that. To score 1,500 points, he'd need to average 100 points for another 15 seasons, and he's 27. It's not impossible, but like I said, McDavid would probably need to play until he was like 50 years old to have a chance at catching Gretzky's points record. The goal scoring record Ovechkin just set, that one, you might be able to talk me into Austin Matthews if he's able to maintain the pace he's currently on, even though he's having a bit of a down year right now in the present. So back to our Oilers. Part of the reason it is so beneficial to have those losing playoff experiences, whether it's losing in a second round, the conference final, the cup final, you need that adversity to draw upon. And that's typically why we see those veteran-laden teams eventually break through. And if you're an everydayer, forgive me for bringing this up again, but it took the Lightning 12 years after drafting Steven Stamkos to finally win a Stanley Cup. The Blackhawks, relatively quick. It only took them 3.5 years after taking Patrick Kane. The Kings, 4 or 5 years after taking Kopitar. The Lightning, it took 10 years. The Golden Knights, it took like 7. The Avalanche, it took like 10. This is a long range, decade-long environment you need to be operating within. As long as we're talking about players in their prime, if you're the Bruins, the Rangers, if you're a team where your star players are already in their early 30s, this does not apply to you. You don't get to look in terms of decades. But if you're a team like the Oilers, where your stars are in their late 20s, you still have, another 5-6 years of elite McDavid, Draisaitl to bank on, and some Evan Bouchard as well. Then you can start to game it out a little bit more long-term and think about it a bit more abstractly in terms of, when we lost to this team, we were able to draw upon it. And that's how I try and think about adversity in sports. And when you're a team like Edmonton, that you went to the Cup final, you almost pulled off the greatest comeback in the history of sports, you were 1 goal away from getting to overtime, you can draw on that. And that's the argument for the Oilers being able to do this. Going on the road all 4 rounds in the playoffs is not something you want to do. The advantages of home ice, though waning, and we see that historically over the last 5 years, the value of home ice in the playoffs has dissipated to some degree. You want those advantages of being in your own bed, of getting treatment at your facility, of a shorter commute, of not being in a hotel, of not eating takeout, of not eating restaurant food, of home prepped or team prep meals. You want to be as locked in as you possibly can. And if you're the Oilers, you have almost as much playoff experience as anyone in the entire playoffs entering this upcoming tournament. The Oilers have played the second most playoff series of any team over the last 3 years. The only team that's played more, the Florida Panthers, who went to the Cup final 2 years in a row. So at that, you got to take a deep breath. You got to convince yourself this is the oldest team in the NHL. They are littered with veteran experience. They have a cup winner amongst them in Corey Perry. There is enough here that if everything breaks right, you can hang in there with anyone. Of course, hanging in with anyone is not beating anyone. And of course, your goal shouldn't be to just get in and see what happens. Your goal should be to meticulously and thoroughly execute a coordinated plan. And that varies from game to game, series to series. But when we're talking about advantages in a playoff series, playoff experience matters a whole lot. In fact, it's one of the reasons, even when Jack Hughes and Dougie Hamilton were healthy, I was very weary of the Devils being considered Stanley Cup contenders. It's the same reason nobody's going to take the Leafs particularly seriously until they make a conference final or a cup final. I think, frankly, a lot of people would say the same about the Winnipeg Jets, about the Washington Capitals. And the Capitals are a little bit different. They do still have some of that championship DNA, Ovechkin, Tom Wilson, John Carlson. They do have quite a few holdovers from that team still on the active team. So it's not quite as prove it to me as it is for maybe Carolina or Toronto or Winnipeg, these teams that have put together consistently strong regular seasons for a half decade now. And when they've gotten in a playoff series against teams that are a little bit better or have a little bit more experience, they just, for whatever reason, they haven't been able to get it done. And some of that is just purely circumstantial. We know hockey is the highest variance postseason of the four major North American sports. And it presents questions as far as like, what's the best way to award a championship, all that good stuff. But that's a summer conversation. Being frank, if you want to see the Oilers do this, number one, they got to get healthy. Number two, they need their big guns locked and loaded. This group has as much playoff experience as anybody they are going to run into. Do they have more playoff experience than the Kings? Yes. Do they have more playoff experience than the Golden Knights? Debatable. Do they have more playoff experience than the Jets? Yes. Do they have more playoff experience than Dallas or Colorado? Debatable. Dallas has been to a cup final and lost. Colorado went to the cup final and won. What do you value more? And the Avalanche have turned over a lot of that roster since they won the Stanley Cup. No Rantanen, no Landeskog. They've lost a lot of the quality depth. Nazem Kadri, people forget, was over a point per game player on that team when they won the Stanley Cup. So if any team can overcome these injuries and overcome playing all your playoff series on the road, which they likely would as the 3 seed if they were to stay in that spot, you are going to need a lot to go your way. But when we're talking about athletics, when we're talking about playoffs, experience matters a lot. And there is no team more experienced over the last 3 years than the Oilers. That is something that you can bank on and something you can feel good about. Now, experience, intangibles, grit, all of those are nice ideas, but you need to have a certain baseline level of talent for those to come into play. If you're getting your doors blown off, it doesn't matter that you went to the Stanley Cup final last year. That's only helpful if we're talking about a series on the margins, where we're talking about two teams that are really close to each other and you need a determining factor, something that's going to help you pull away. That's where grit, experience, and intangibles do come into play and can be beneficial. But that will do it for today's edition of Locked On Oilers. If you could be so kind, please subscribe to the show wherever you get your podcasts or over on YouTube. Thank you so much for making Locked On Oilers your first listen of the day. For your second listen, go check out Locked On NHL, covering the biggest stories from across the league with the local expertise of Locked On. I will talk to you guys tomorrow. Until then, let's go Oilers.